Senate will come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Senators Baisley, Bridges, Buckner, Coleman, Cutter,
Excused.
Danielson,
Excused.
Exum, Fields, Gardner, Gardner,
Excused.
Janal, Gonzalez, Hanson,
Excused.
Hinrichsen, Jaquez Lewis, Kirkmeyer, Kirkmeyer,
Excused.
Kolker, Liston, Lundeen, Lundeen,
He's looking for Gardner. Excused.
Marchman, Moreno, Mullica, Mullica,
Excused.
Pelton B, Pelton R, Priola, Rich, Roberts, Rodriguez, Simpson, Smallwood, Sullivan, Van Winkle, Will, Winter, Zenzinger, Gardner, Gardner, Kirkmeyer, Lundeen, Mr. President,
Here. Good morning. Roll call is 31 present, 0 absent, 4 excused. We do have a quorum. Will the clerk please add Senator Danielson to the roll? The morning roll call now is 32 present, 0 absent, 3 excused. We still have that quorum. Will the good senator from Wheat Ridge please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I am sorry, folks. Thank you for your patience. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the journal, Senator Jaquez Lewis.
Good morning, Mr. President. I move that the Senate Journal of Tuesday, March 21st, 2023, a very long day, be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. That motion is adopted. Senate Services.
March 22nd, 2023, correctly engrossed Senate Bills 109, 188, 189, 190, and Senate Resolution 5, correctly revised. House Bill 1179, correctly re-revised. House Bill 1093, correctly enrolled. Senate Bills 96 and 150, Senate Joint Memorial 3, Senate Resolution 5.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege by the senator from Newcastle.
The motion is for the Senate to proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate will proceed out of order.
Thank you,
Will.
thank you, Mr. President. Senator Buckner and I have a tribute today, so we request a moment of personal privilege.
Granted. Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
The Colorado Cancer Coalition, the University of Colorado Cancer Center, and partners wish to celebrate preventive screening and cancer survivorship, particularly as cancer is the leading cause of death in Colorado, and colorectal cancer is very common and is the second leading cause of death. In Colorado, colorectal cancer deeply impacts communities of color and rural Coloradans and is expected to be the leading cause of cancer death in people under 50 by the year 2030.
Moment of personal privilege, please. Yeah, thank you.
Granted.
I'm going to tribute the Senate of the Colorado Legislature convened in the first regular session of the 74th General Assembly hereby recognizes Colorado Cancer Coalition. Cancer Coalition screening program at the University of Colorado Cancer Center wish to celebrate March as Colorectal Cancer Awareness Week. In Colorado, colorectal cancer deeply impacts our communities of color and rural Coloradans. And so, you know, Senator Buckner and I ran some bills with that to help rural Colorado and her communities. It's a leading cause of death in people in their 50 by 2030, as she said, and the partners have navigated more than 36,000 people into preventative screening since 2006. 36,000 since 2006. Programs detected over 400 patients. Colorado Cancer Coalition estimates that we've also prevented over 550 cancers detected in advance and saved the healthcare system conservatively $20 million based on the conservative amount to treat these cancers minus the program costs. They also strive to integrate lung cancer screening, identification of high-risk families, and integrate with the statewide breast and cervical program for integrated care. Patient navigation and community health work is a big part of reaching our medically underserved communities. On a request to Senator Perry Wilt and Senator Janet Buckner, given this 22nd day of March 2023, State Capitol, Denver, Colorado, signed by the President of the Senate. Yeah, go ahead.
Senator Buckner.
The Colorado Cancer Coalition, with partners, are hoping for more integrated cancer prevention efforts, including colorectal cancer in the future, and will continue to partner with policymakers to think about sustainable cancer strategies, especially for the medically underserved. And in honor of those fighting colorectal cancer and to future opportunities for prevention, please join me in a strong arm selfie.
I'd like to recognize, we have three of our guests over here to the left of me. Andrea Dwyer, Elsa Staples, and Wesley Lighthall, all with the Cancer Coalition. Welcome. Thank you.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate continue to proceed out of order for an announcement by the Chair of the Health and Human Services Committee.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. The Health and Human Services Committee will not meet today upon adjournment. The bill that is currently scheduled, which is Senate Bill 179, will be moved to the Human Services Committee for tomorrow at 1:30, along with the other bills that are on the calendar. Thank you, Mr. President.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I move that the Senate continue to proceed out of order for a moment of personal privilege by the senators of the Denver delegation.
Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you. Members, as we speak, there's another active shooter at East High School, the group of kids who just came to the Capitol to advocate for safety, in particular in our schools. you question even coming down to the well right now to have this, to make this announcement. What does it do? What does it mean? But I just think it's unfortunate that we have to keep coming down to the well as frequently as we do. Somebody made a comment about how frequently they've had to come to the well for memorials because of all the folks who've passed away. It's crazy how frequently we've had to come down to the well for active shooters in the moment that we're in right now. It's happening right now, right down the street from the Capitol. So I really wanted to ask again, because I know folks feel differently about it, first and foremost for prayer, but I also want to ask that we continue as a body to figure out ways to help address the situation. Because it doesn't just happen in Denver, it happens all across our state. And sometimes we don't even hear about these things. And it's not just in schools, as we know it happens in so many other environments. So I just wanted to make that announcement and ask my colleagues to join me, just for us to continue to be in the mindset of the power of the work that we do and how critical it is, in part, but there's so much other work that we need to figure out outside of this building on how we address these issues. And in particular, here we are talking about an active shooter. There's other ways, there's other forms of violence, but in this conversation, we're continuing to talk about an active shooter, and you know, we don't know very many details, but we just wanted to make that announcement to be praying, but also let's continue to figure out what we can do both inside and outside of this building to address these issues. You can't legislate love. We can figure out a way to address some of the concerns through legislation, but at the end of the day, these things and people are going to continue to try to hurt each other, and we got to figure out a way to lead by example so that this doesn't continue to happen, in particular in our state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Third reading of bills. Consent calendar. Will the clerk please read the titles to the bills on the consent calendar? And also, will the clerk please add Senator Mullica to the roll?
House Bill 1179, Representative Morrow and Winter T. Senators Henriksen and Simpson, concerning the maximum uncommitted reserve that may be retained in the Agricultural Products Inspection Cash Fund.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the passage of the one bill on the third reading consent calendar, House Bill 1179.
Is there any discussion? Discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of the bill on the third reading of bill's consent calendar. Are there any no votes? Senator Baisley.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1179.
Senator Baisley will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1179. Senator Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, would like to be recorded as no vote on 1179.
Senator Van Winkle will be recorded as a no vote on House Bill 1179. With a vote of 31 ayes, 2 noes, 0 absent, 2 excused, House Bill 1179 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Roberts, Will, Pelton B, Pelton R, Marchman, Bridges. Please add Senator Exum as a co-sponsor on House Bill 1179. Third reading of bills. Final passage. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 109?
Senate Bill 109, Senators Pelton B. and Mullica, Representatives Lynch and Snyder, concerning a criminal penalty for the supplier when a person dies as a result of the use of a controlled substance.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 109 for third and final passage.
Is there any discussion? Senator Mullica.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I want to take an opportunity before I get into my comments to thank some of the stakeholders and Mental Health Colorado, Healthier Colorado, COPA, where we had a lot of long conversations to try to come to some solutions. I also want to take an opportunity to thank Lisa Rayville and her organization. I've had the opportunity to tour some of the things that that organization does around harm reduction. I think that they do some amazing things for our community, and the services they provide are invaluable, and the care they provide individuals who are suffering from addiction is pretty amazing. Members, Senate Bill 109 obviously had a long debate yesterday, and it deserves a long debate with what we're looking at. We're looking at people's lives, and we are looking at consequences when those lives are taken and what those consequences mean to the person that caused that life to be taken. And driving in this morning after a long night last night, I was going over in my head, why did I run this bill? What perspectives do I bring with me? What hats do I wear? And obviously I'm a husband, and I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm also a nurse and a member of the community, and I have the privilege of representing the community that I grew up in. And during the debate yesterday, we heard some things. We saw some amendments. And I want to be clear, when we're looking at Senate Bill 109, this involves when a person loses their life. When someone is dealt a drug and that drug causes a loss of life. And we saw some amendments yesterday around drugs that are being lawfully distributed by a pharmacist. Members, this is when drugs are being unlawfully distributed. We also heard some terms yesterday that this bill is vengeful. I would caution this body to be very careful with our words. When you use that word, I was thinking about it as I came in this morning, and those conversations that I've had with members of my community who have lost their family members to overdose deaths. Would we use that word with that family member when they're asking us, what are you going to do? Where's the accountability for the person that dealt that drug to my family member? That when that family member who lost someone asks for that accountability, that we're going to tell them that that's vengeful? We also heard words in the debate that these individuals' lives only matter after they're dead. I told you one of the hats I wear when I come down here is a nurse. I'm an ER nurse. I've saved people's lives. I've administered naloxone. I've seen people come back from it. I've also seen people die. I've taken the call from EMS, coming in, person found down in the Burger King bathroom with a needle in their arm. I performed CPR on that individual. I've done everything I could to save that individual's life. And they died. They died. Who else in this room has experienced hearing the family of that person cry and wail outside the room after you do everything you can to save that individual's life? I have. I've lived that. And then when that family asks, what are you going to do? Where's the accountability for that person that dealt that drug? We're going to say that asking for that accountability is vengeful? You're going to tell me that I don't care about that person's life after I just did everything I could to save their life? We need to be careful of the words we use in this room, in this building. And yes, does this bill deserve debate? Absolutely. Absolutely. We are looking at big things, and there's real consequences. And I am willing to have those debates, and we should. And we should. But know where I'm coming from when I sponsor this bill is because I care about people and because I care about my community. And my community has been clear, and I agree with them. I'm tired of seeing people die. And if you make that choice to deal a drug and you kill someone in my community, there's going to be serious consequences. Now, it doesn't mean, members, that we haven't been willing to work on this bill. It doesn't mean that we haven't passed amendments to make sure that we're bringing in Good Samaritan laws. It doesn't mean that we didn't pass amendments yesterday to capture sharing, because our goal is to go after that person who is dealing and who is profiting off of that death. But members, we passed a bill last year, House Bill 1326, and many in this room voted on that bill, and many in this room voted in favor of that bill. And that bill said that if you deal fentanyl, that there is going to be an elevated offense if someone dies from that. Members, people in our community are not just dying from fentanyl. They're dying from heroin, they're dying from meth, they're dying from cocaine. Why should that justice, why should that consequence be any different? Obviously, we know fentanyl. We know fentanyl is a very deadly substance. But if that person dies from a fentanyl overdose, why does the family whose child died from a heroin overdose deserve any different justice? I think that's a question that we need to look at, and I think that's a question we should all be asking ourselves when we look at Senate Bill 109. Members, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to make this case. I appreciate the time we were given to debate this bill, because it's a very serious bill. But I want to make one thing clear. This bill is about holding individuals accountable when they're profiting off of people's deaths, when people are dying in our community. I ask for a yes vote.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a serious bill that should take serious consideration, and no one is saying it shouldn't. I've also talked to my community. It's also in Adams County and in Broomfield, and they want solutions that work. They also want to stop deaths. That is true. And if we actually want to stop the death of people in our community, there is a way to treat addiction, and there is a way to not treat addiction. We have tried time and time again to work on the war on drugs, and it has not worked. Over-incarceration has not worked to make sure we're actually addressing this issue. I have knocked doors. I've heard from my community. I understand what they are saying to me, and they want a solution, which is why last year I worked really hard to put millions of dollars into overdose prevention. Those dollars are just being spent now. Those dollars are just being allocated now. Let's let those dollars work. We know that we can save lives with overdose reversal treatment. We know that this bill actually punishes friends and family. Could you imagine? Could you imagine going to a party and sharing something with someone you love, and they die, and how you already feel, and now you're going to go into the criminal justice system? We didn't allow for those amendments. So if we're actually going to treat addiction as something we need to treat like healthcare, let's do that. This is actually punishing those. So yes, I have been on those doors. I have heard from my community, and I understand what they want and what they need. And that's why we need to address addiction prevention. And I don't think this bill is a solution to that. I want to see less deaths too. But the path forward is not this bill.
Senator Henriksen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 109 in its current form. Today in Colorado, it is a DF1 offense when fentanyl is distributed and that fentanyl is involved in the death of the user. I fully support that policy. I support that policy because fentanyl is unlike any other drug on our streets, and unlike any other drug epidemic we've seen in the last 40 years, fentanyl is mixed into the supply of all street drugs, from cocaine to LSD, MDMA to fake OxyContin, fake Percocet to fake Adderall. And it is precisely because fentanyl is mixed into every other controlled substance that we've seen an across-the-board surge in overdose deaths. Today, if one were to distribute illicit drugs in Colorado, there is an incentive in criminal statute to ensure that one's product does not contain fentanyl. That incentive is the prospect of 8 to 32 years in prison if the end user dies and there was fentanyl in that product. If Senate Bill 109 were to become law, all Schedule 1 and 2 controlled substances would carry this penalty. So that incentive I talked about is eliminated. Granted, it creates a new incentive not to deal in illicit substances at all. How effective do we think that will be? Given the amount of ink in statute already pertaining to illicit drug distribution, and given that the distribution of drugs in our society is widespread, I would suggest that it is unlikely to have any effect in driving drug dealers out of the market entirely. Instead, I believe that the practical effect of this policy will be to eliminate the new incentive we created less than a year ago for those engaged in this illegal market to stay out of fentanyl and to take safeguards to ensure that fentanyl doesn't enter their product's supply chain. And as a result of that, I think there will be even more overdose deaths. Unfortunately, this fear is backed in research. A 2017 study by the Drug Policy Alliance found that there's no empirical evidence that blanket drug-induced homicide prosecutions save lives. Analysis of drug-induced homicide practices in jurisdictions in New Jersey, Tennessee, North Carolina, Illinois, Louisiana, and New York found that despite dramatic growth in drug-induced homicide prosecutions, all of the jurisdictions experienced a significant increase in overdose deaths, ranging from 7.6% to 20.1% in a single year. The sponsors of this bill have stated that their goal is to get after truly heinous actors in our drug epidemic and reduce overdose deaths. I absolutely believe in their sincerity, but I believe that this bill is a knee-jerk reaction to that goal. That's why the experts in the fields of substance abuse and public health oppose this bill. If this bill becomes law, I fully expect that we will see more ink splashed on the crime blotter of our local newspapers reporting on new DF1 charges. And if those charges were to be levied on the most heinous actors, as is the stated goal of this legislation, I would say great, because I fully support that. And yet, here's from a Milwaukee News affiliate investigative report in 2017. In the early 2000s in New Jersey, 78% of drug-induced homicide prosecutions were of friends of the decedents who did not regularly sell drugs. In southeastern Wisconsin, an analysis of 100 drug-induced homicide prosecutions similarly found that close to 90% of the defendants were either friends or relatives of the decedent or low-level dealers selling to support their own drug use. And in Illinois, a review of drug-induced homicide prosecutions indicated that the person charged was typically the last person who was with the decedent before their death and was often a friend rather than a drug supplier. Nationally, a study of media reports of drug-induced homicide prosecutions between 2000 and 2016 revealed that half of those charged were social contacts of the deceased, not traditional dealers, and those who were deemed dealers were at the very bottom of the trafficking chain. So that causes me some consternation as a matter of sound public policy. Now, that consternation is somewhat alleviated by Amendment L06, which I don't think does enough to recenter prosecutorial action on the heinous distributors, but it's a step in the right direction, and I do thank the sponsors for that. Here's where the heart of my concern lies. I also believe that if we turn the page of our newspapers from the crime blotter to the obituaries, we will see more ink there as a result of this bill as well. If we magically break the trend that's been observed everywhere else, and we alone become the state that strikes a blow to drug kingpins with this statute rather than common users, will it be worth it if the net result is more dead neighbors, friends, and family members? That is what I'm trying to avoid. And that is what several of the amendments that were rejected yesterday seek to avoid. And had we been more deliberate about how this policy was crafted to ensure that we're moving forward in a strategic manner that avoids the tragic outcomes that I fear, I would gladly be an aye vote today. I truly wish that had been the case. If we pass this policy, I pray that I am wrong. I would rejoice at being wrong. I would rejoice if this bill meets its intended goals. And sadly, I don't think I'm wrong. So I will be a no today. And I ask that you would consider joining me.
Senator Priola.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a tough act to follow. The good senator from Pueblo made a very good case why the proper vote on this bill is no. As I'll state again, as I did last night, the statistics show that there's a 7% increase in deaths after this kind of policy is put in place. With the current numbers in Colorado, that means 104 deaths will occur next year. The statistics from the Drug Policy Alliance, as the good senator from Pueblo mentioned, they're real. They're real. 78% of friends and family are the folks who get caught up in this kind of prosecution. And as we will recall from the debate we had last year on the fentanyl bill, some of the selling points on that policy change were that it would incentivize dealers to not put fentanyl in drugs. As testimony has been and the facts are such, fentanyl's in almost all drugs now, which leads me to believe that the DAs currently have the tools they need to prosecute. I'm going to go back in time a little bit and recount some of my experiences with DA bills and how they treat policies. And I assure you, Mr. President, does have a nexus to this bill. Many years ago in the House, the good senator from El Paso County and I were there at the time, there was a direct file bill that Representative B.J. Nickel and I supported, and we had many debates back and forth. And what was at issue is the DAs were charging youth as adults in crimes. And they were doing it, who knows the motives per se, but it was very coincidental that they would usually do it 9 months out from them being on the ballot. Being what happens with press, salacious stories hit the front page, these DAs were seen as tough on crime. Tough on crime. And so they would make an example out of some 16 or 17-year-old and charge him as an adult. That bill took that right away from them, and they fought it voraciously. Then fast forward to a couple years ago, the death penalty debate. Part of the reason I supported that repeal is because the DAs would say, we charge people with the death penalty, but then we plead down to life. We plead down to life. How fair is that? To dangle someone's life over their head if they don't cooperate with you? That, in my opinion, is part of the motivation behind this bill. That, in my opinion, is part of the motivation of this bill. You and your college roommate get in an unfortunate situation, they die, or your family member, so that you're trying to wean off of whatever substance they're addicted to. and you get caught up and are able to be charged by this, they will say, you got a choice. 32 years in the slammer, or do what we say. Play ball. That, in my opinion, is some of the motivation for this bad policy. Let me be clear. All of us down here have the best intention, and we're trying to make the right choice with the facts we know and the facts we have. We all want to save lives, not only on this bill, but on other bills. And we simply have a different perspective. And I have never questioned that. But part of what debate entails is bringing out those facts, bringing them to light, giving folks time to pause and reflect on their preconceived assumptions. There's a saying that goes, anger is fear's mask. And we see it down here on many issues, because we are fearful. This drug epidemic is consuming our youth and is consuming our country with substances that have been illegal for decades. They are destabilizing governments around the world. You look at a map of Mexico, and do you know what part of Mexico the government controls? The government of Mexico controls Mexico City region and some of the resort towns, and the narcos have divided up the rest of the country for a substance that has been illegal in this country, the largest market, for decades. And that is back to my point about if we keep doing things the same way as we always have and expect a different outcome, to me, that's the definition of insanity. And so my time sitting on the interim committee of substance abuse, I've done the deep dive. I've talked to experts and looked at the studies. And we came together and found a meeting of the mind, which I supported last year. And here we are, 11 months later, undoing that. In what I see as a knee-jerk reaction of folks, DAs, who desperately want to have that tool to possibly be on the front page of the local paper when it's time to be up for re-election. Look at me. I am tough on crime. I am tough on addiction. I am tough on dealers. But what they're really doing is perpetuating death, perpetuating destroying lives, perpetuating the cycle of criminal justice, and not getting at the true root of the problem. It's a medical problem that needs to be solved in a medical manner, not through the criminal justice system. I ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 109.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the good senator from the Eastern Plains and the good senator from Thornton, thank you. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. It's important for Colorado. It's important for our communities. So I thank you for bringing it forward. We passed a bill last year. We passed a bill last year that increased access to treatment for all Coloradoans in crisis, that invested millions of dollars into strategies for that. Millions of dollars in strategies to help prevent drug users from being involved or further involved in the criminal justice system. We did that last year. We passed millions of dollars to do that. No one in this chamber disagreed with that investment. What we didn't fix was the problem that occurred in 2019, where a bill was passed, 1263, that allowed for up to 4 grams, not just of fentanyl, meth, heroin, and cocaine to be in anyone's possession. law enforcement officials, district attorneys asked us last year, before the bill, to help them get these drug dealers off the street. That the bill that was passed in 19 was causing a problem. I don't know if you all remember, but I remember the chief of police from Denver stating in the paper that the legislature was complicit in these deaths because we're the ones who passed the law that allowed for up to 4 grams of cocaine, of meth, of heroin, of fentanyl to be in an individual's possession. In 2011, 379 people died from overdose involving opioids in Colorado. In 2021, 1,200 people died. Law enforcement officials asked us last year, with the passage of the bill that was last year, they said it didn't go far enough. They said they still needed help to be able to crack down on drug dealers and get them off the street. We didn't listen to them. We still have more people dying. This bill helps hold drug dealers accountable when a person in our community is killed. And it's happening in all of our communities. In this last year, we had law enforcement officials in Greeley that had to be rushed to the hospital because when they pulled someone over, they had fentanyl on them. The officers didn't know it. Luckily, they had the training, and the officers were fine, ended up being fine. Just about a month ago, person high on drugs. I live out in the country. I don't live in a suburban area or urbanized area. I live out in uncorporate Weld County. Just about a month ago, a young man and his girlfriend in front of my house and my daughter's house, pumped up on drugs, was going after his girlfriend and turned around and shot himself. That's what's happening in our communities from allowing possession of up to 4 grams of these drugs, of these synthetic opioids, of these poisons. That's what's happening, very real in our communities. This bill will give law enforcement and district attorneys the ability to go after additional criminal charges against drug dealers. That's what it's targeted for. It's not targeted to the users, the people who don't just really know better. But if there aren't consequences, if there aren't the tools in the toolbox for law enforcement and for district attorneys, we will still be complicit in those deaths that the good senator from Thornton talked about that are occurring in our communities. I urge an aye vote on this bill.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the good senator from Thornton, the good senator from Northern Peltonia. He has one of the highest drug trafficking highways comes through his district. I have a couple. 287, I-25 go through my district. Major highways for illegal drugs coming to the Front Range to be sold and to kill people. In my new Senate district, there are very, very remote parts that have abandoned ranch houses that have been taken over by these drug pushers, these drug lords. We need this bill to get tough on these actors. Real consequences need to happen. The fentanyl bill that passed last year made it harder on DAs, made it harder on law enforcement to do their job. This bill helps them get back to doing their job because that's what they want to do.
They want to see fewer deaths. They want to see fewer drugs on the street. When we start having consequences for illegal acts, in my mind, that will start to curb this abuse and this out of control problem we have in this state and in this country. So with that, again, I want to thank the good senators for bringing policy like this. I think it's a good thing for our state. And with that, I am an enthusiastic yes.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we are losing in so many ways when it comes to dealing with drug dealers in our community that are causing death. The way I look at this bill is that we need to limit the supply of the poisons that are coming into our community. We need to limit the supply of the poisonous drugs that are coming into our community, that these dealers are profiting by engaging with really addicts. I heard someone say that this is a knee-jerk approach, that this is hard on being hard on crime. I disagree. I believe that this is a pragmatic approach as it relates to families who are demanding justice and accountability for the death of their loved ones who has been exposed to these poisons, these drugs. We had a really healthy debate, and there was one debate as relates to one amendment that if the defendant misrepresented the controlled substance to the person that was dead, first of all, drug dealers really don't even know what is in their products most of the time. It doesn't come with a label like what you see for aspirin or maybe whatever you're buying. You know how you have the ingredients. When you are buying drugs, there's no label that tells you what's in it. Now, we do have the fentanyl testing strips that would let you know if fentanyl's in it, but basically, we don't know what they're selling. And do drug dealers really care? I don't think they do. They're in business. And their commodity is drugs. And when you're a drug dealer, it's like maybe going to the farmer's market. You know, you can buy one apple or you can buy a bushel. They will sell you whatever you want. One, and I don't know how much it costs, $10, you know, they could probably adjust for inflation. They could do, you know, whatever you want, whatever you can afford. But there is specific definition in reference to how a district attorney would qualify someone as a drug dealer. In the bill, it talks about the level of grams for low level. So you could be a low-level dealer, you can be a minimal-level dealer, or you could be a large-scale dealer. You've been hearing about this amount, 32 years. That 32 years, if you are a big-time, large-scale dealer. That's the range. If you know anything about our sentencing code, there's no truth in sentencing anyway. So just because you have that 32 years doesn't mean that's what you're going to actually serve. Because do you know that while you're in jail, you can get good time? They use that as a way of population management. Good time, if you go to school, if you behave well, you get your GED, you can shave off that 32 years, if you get that. To be a large-scale dealer, you're talking about 225 grams of cocaine or 112 grams of meth. Low level, 7 grams, 14 grams. We need to limit the supply, and the way you kind of do that is that you have to have accountability. You have to have accountability, and accountability doesn't mean if you are caught up on a drug case and you have to say, well, I misrepresented what I was selling, or I only had a little bit. What I can tell you about death is final. There's no more earned time. Death means it's over. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between an addict and a dealer, because I see both in my community. Two different sets of behaviors. And we've heard about that. But when you are an addict, then you have these urgings and these cravings to get to that level of high or whatever it is. You want to get the drug again and again. And those people deserve to have access to behavioral health. We shouldn't have dealers out there profiting off of people who have this strong urge and powerful addiction to a drug. And then we had an amendment that failed, that if you just sign this piece of paper, I'll sign the piece of paper if you give me one more hit or whatever it is you need. Wrong solution, wrong approach. We need to provide more access to behavioral health for people who are addicts. That is the right approach. And for the dealers that are selling this commodity in our community that's causing devastation, because when you are a dealer or an addict, you do desperate things. We do need to limit the supply of drugs in our community. And the way I think we do that is to let dealers know that you are going to be held accountable. If you're dispensing a drug that ultimately kills someone, that's murder. Let me tell you what happened in Arapahoe County. It's a very sad story. This is a story from a victim's family. This young girl was 16 years old. She was at a house party. And at the house party, a dealer had a whole bunch of pills, drugs. Gave one to the 16-year-old. She consumed it. She was unresponsive. The dealer said he saw her, he noticed her, noticed that she was unresponsive, noticed that she was probably overdosed. The dealer didn't call 911. During the investigation, they also learned that he sexually assaulted the girl that same night. Dealers are manipulative. They want you to get hooked. They want you to keep coming back to them because they are the source and the supplier of your addiction. And we've created this hierarchy: low level, mid level, large level scale dealer. That doesn't sound like that's hard on crime to me. You can pick and choose the kind of dealer that you want to be. And when you choose the level of deal you want to get, then it has here the discretion of time that you can get.
Senator Fields, would you like to go into your next 10 minutes?
So members, thank you, Mr. President. I will wrap up. To me, this is about the loss of life. This is about accountability for those who sell drugs that ultimately cause an overdose and death of an individual, a family member, a person that could be contributing to our society right now. I support this bill.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. So I rise in support of Senate Bill 109, and it's interesting to hear people talk about insanity, definition of insanity, what that means, in light of the Colorado Health Institute's latest article, or one of their most latest articles. New research and interactive graphics released by the Colorado Health Institute based on data from CDPHE show that 1,477 Coloradans died of drug overdoses in 2020, the most overdose deaths ever recorded in the state, and a 38% increase in 2019. And it's the same story we hear month after month, year after year. So what are we doing to change that? Because you hear what we're doing isn't working. Well, I've got some here. 2020. This is from the Colorado General Assembly website. If any of you have gone onto that, I'd encourage citizens of the state of Colorado, hop onto that website, just do a quick search to see what's been done at the General Assembly over the last several years on this issue. And the amount of money, the amount of taxpayer money that has gone into this. 2020, treatment, opioid, and other substance use disorders. Concerning treatment for substance use disorder, Governor signed. 2016, substance use abuse treatment program concerning continuation of rural alcohol substance use treatment. Governor signed. Research Center Prevention, 2017. Research Center Prevention, Substance Abuse Addiction, 2017. Governor signed. 2016. Increasing access, effective substance use services. Governor signed. 2017. Study, inpatient substance use disorder treatment. Governor signed. 2018. Substance use disorder payment and coverage. Governor signed. 2019, substance use disorders prevention measures. Governor signed. 2023, this year, secondary school, student substance use, going on right now. 2021, prevention of substance use disorders. Governor signed. 2019, harm reduction, substance use disorders. Governor signed. 2020, harm reduction, substance use disorders. Governor signed. 2019, substance use disorders recovery. Governor signed. 2018, substance use disorder treatment. Governor signed. 2020, substance use disorder recovery. Governor signed. That's page 1. And any citizen can hop onto the General Assembly's website and see what we've done. What's the definition of insanity? Bill after bill after bill, millions and millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars going towards this insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm not talking about the last 2 years. These go back 2016, 2015. We're talking about 7 years of proven failed attempts to try to get our arms around substance use disorders. That's the definition of insanity. 7 years, tens of millions of taxpayer money, and what's happening? Are we slowing this down a little bit, seeing slightly fewer deaths every year? No, it gets progressively worse every year. And I know it's probably insulting, because you see the same bill sponsors' names on almost all these bills. It's probably insulting. Probably hard to look at all of the time and energy and money that have gone into these failed policies and say, you know, maybe this wasn't the right way to do it. But the senator from Thornton is spot on. The citizens of Colorado have had quite enough of this experiment, this failed experiment, where everything that we do and the tens of millions of dollars that we funnel towards this is making things worse and worse every year. The definition of insanity? Page 1 so far. No reason to go through the rest, because we can keep going farther and farther and see more of the taxpayer dollars that have funneled into making the situation just a little worse every year. So I commend the bill sponsors for being bold enough to try something different, to break the cycle of insanity, and actually do what our constituents have been asking for and the right things for the state of Colorado, and encourage an aye vote on Senate Bill 109.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. When you bring forward a bill in this chamber, you have to demonstrate why you think that this bill is the correct path forward. One would hope that you can bring forward data, that you can bring forward evidence-based practices that drive the decision-making that happens in this chamber. During committee, here on the floor, for hours yesterday, the sponsors of this measure were unable to bring forward data-driven, evidence-based information to support their reasoning behind this bill. I shared powerful anecdotes. But anecdotes should not drive policymaking, particularly when we are talking about an epidemic that is killing people. The individuals who work alongside the Coloradans on the front lines of this epidemic are united in their opposition to this bill. "20 states across this country already have this policy in effect. Many of the states have been prosecuting this policy for years. They've seen no reduction in the number of overdose deaths that they are experiencing in their states. What makes us think that we're somehow gonna change what data has borne out in 20 other states? What the public health experts right here, right now in our state are begging us to hear. We've had a number of anecdotes shared here from the well today. So let me share this one. In committee, we heard testimony from Kira DeGruy Kennedy. And she shared this story, her story. "My parents put me into treatment when I was 13 years old. After a significant trauma led me to start using drugs and alcohol to numb my pain and attempt suicide several times. In the 20 years since then, I've mentored close to 100 women who are fighting literally for their lives in a battle against drug addiction." Now, this part of her testimony, I think, rang most true for me. For people who don't understand addiction, it can feel like the people suffering from this disease are choosing the lives they have, that they're choosing to use, to hurt their friends and family, to lose their standing in society, choosing drugs over life. It's hard to articulate the shame, despair, and trauma of living in active addiction to someone who doesn't have the disease, who doesn't understand. The fight to stay sober has to be taken 1 second at a time, because anything more than that is unbearable. Relapse isn't inevitable, but almost. The cycle of this disease is complicated and deeply personal. The cycle of this disease is complicated and deeply personal in the same way that recovery from advanced cancer requires intensive treatment, medication, support, love, and community. The disease of addiction requires the same. The people who have gathered here today to speak against this bill are the experts of this field, the people with credentials, expertise, and competence to make decisions about addiction and recovery are here today to tell you that this bill will not save lives. This bill will make a situation that already feels excruciating, heartbreaking, life-threatening, will make that situation worse. I understand the argument that for some, this bill may feel like justice, but I think we all need to consider that every victim sees justice differently. This bill will not save lives. It will not bring back the people I've loved and lost to this disease. It will not make our communities safer. It will, however, make it harder for people who are suffering to get the help that they need and that they deserve. I'm begging you today to vote no on this bill. I will work with every one of you closely on how to keep these incredibly harmful substances out of our communities and save lives. But we have to start by not making the problem worse. I share these words, colleagues, and we had a strong debate in this chamber yesterday. I share these words because we find ourselves in a moment where we are seeing people who we love, constituents, the people of this state, dying. And what we know is that crisis exacerbates inequality, and that this overdose crisis pushes folks further and further and further into the margins. Folks who are in the throes of active addiction are not going to hear the nuance of a cut point. They're not going to hear that if you jump through these following hoops around remuneration, around a cut point of a weight, that I won't be prosecuted. They're going to see the headlines of 32 years in prison, and if they find themselves in a moment of crisis, or if they find a friend or a loved one or an acquaintance or somebody they met in a McDonald's bathroom, they're going to be less likely to dial 911. That's why in the states that we have seen pass these drug-induced homicide policies, we see an increase in overdose deaths in the aftermath of these bills being put into statutes. That's the data. That's why the opposition is united in the way that they are, asking you to vote no. That's why we ran a dozen amendments to ask you, as a matter of fact, to do harm reduction to this bill that cuts harm reduction practices and policies at the knees. Every single one of those amendments was declined by the sponsors because their coalition, the district attorneys and law enforcement, said they couldn't agree to those amendments. Being the elder millennial that I am, I seem to recall another law enforcement driven practice and policy from my childhood. Being the elder millennial that I am, maybe you all, and the Gen Xers here too in the room, will recall the DARE program, the Just Say No to Drugs program. Still have the shirt, I still have the stickers, right?
Senator Gonzalez, would you like to go into your next 10 minutes?
Please, thank you. And we saw that policy a generation ago said we can end the drug crisis through the war on drugs, through Nancy Reagan, and through DARE. Well, we all can, I think, acknowledge that those policies from a generation ago failed But Senate Bill 109 is crafted in a manner that seeks to bring back those failed policies of get tough on crime, of taking on the war on drugs. Maybe we'll get stickers. I shouldn't be flip about this. Because people are dying. But this policy, not only does it do nothing to bring them back, the data from every other state in the country that has passed similar policies informs us that this policy will lead to an increase in overdose deaths. So based on the anecdotes, based on the information from public health experts, based on the data, I ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 109.
Senator Roberts. Actually, Senator Roberts, before you start, will the clerk please add Senators Hansen and Cutter to the roll? Senator Roberts, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I want to thank everybody for the debate this morning. I rise in support of this bill, but I also acknowledge that there's valid reasons why somebody would be against this bill. And I guess I'm not up here to convince folks to vote either way, but I do want to just clarify what we're actually voting on, because there have been a lot of comments over the last 2 days that don't reflect anything that's in the bill. And we need to be clear about what we're voting on. To the good senator from Denver, in sharing testimony that we heard in committee throughout the last 2 days about people suffering from addiction, people who use drugs, this bill isn't about them. This bill is about the people that sell them drugs in an organized way for profit and kill them. And that's terrible. This bill is about equalizing the penalties that we passed last year for when that happens when somebody deals fentanyl to drugs like meth and cocaine and heroin and other substances. So I just want to be really clear about what this bill does if it were to become law. 2 things. First, the drugs need to be sold for money, for profit. Thanks to the amendment that the sponsors put into the bill, L006, yesterday, this is not about sharing. This is not a situation where somebody's at a party and sharing drugs with somebody else, and that person happens to tragically die. That person would not be prosecuted under this law. They need to be making money off of the transaction. And then, this bill doesn't even come into effect unless the person who bought the drugs dies. They're dead, no longer here, they have died. That's when this bill comes into effect. So the question before us is whether we think that in that situation, whether it's fentanyl or any other drug, if that victim deserves the same level of justice for the person that sold them drugs. Now, that law about fentanyl has been in place. It went into effect on July 1st, almost 8 months ago. So let's talk about some data. 6 cases have been prosecuted under the new fentanyl law. 6. There's been way more overdose deaths than that since that time, unfortunately. Way more. But the DAs are using this charge to target the drug dealers who do this as an enterprise for profit. All 6 of those cases, not a single one of them was a family member, a friend, or even an acquaintance of that victim who died. These are the drug dealers that are targeting people and making money off of their transactions. One of them we heard about in committee was a 40-year-old man who sold fentanyl to a 16-year-old girl. Thank God we are able to increase the penalties for that person. He killed a 16-year-old girl, probably, I don't know the details, I'm guessing she was not a drug addict. addicted to drugs, but she was preyed upon by this gentleman who wanted to make some money. All 6 of those cases as well were found out by law enforcement because those individuals later sold drugs to an undercover agent. These are the drug kingpins. These are the ones that are profiting off of death in Colorado. And the question before us in this bill is whether you think that if somebody who sells fentanyl in that situation will get a higher penalty. Do you think that if they happen to sell meth or cocaine or heroin to that same 16-year-old girl, do you think they should have a less penalty because it was a different type of drug? I don't think so. And that's why I'm in strong support of Senate Bill 109 and ask for your aye vote.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, today I ask for your support on Senate Bill 109. While we need to continue to increase the support for those suffering from substance abuse, we cannot tackle the rapidly increasing drug problem in Colorado without attacking it from both sides. And this bill will allow us to do just that by going after the dealer. This bill allows us to prosecute the criminal behavior of the dealer to bring justice to the deceased and their loved ones. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 109. Are there any no votes? Senators Exum, Coleman, Gonzalez, Kolker, Majority Leader Moreno, Rodriguez, Jaquez Lewis, Henriksen, Sullivan, Danielson, Cutter, Priola, Winter, Buckner. Please add the president. With a vote of 20 ayes, 15 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, Senate Bill 109 will the clerk please add Senator Marchman as a no on Senate Bill 109? Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be recorded as a no vote on SB 109, please.
Thank you. You are recorded as such. With 19 ayes, 16 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 109 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Senators Roberts, Pelton R., Simpson, Van Winkle, Will, Baisley, Rich, Liston, Gardner, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood, Minority Leader Lundin. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 188?
Senate Bill 188, Senators Gonzalez and Jaquez Lewis, Representative Froelich, and Titone, concerning protections for accessing reproductive health care.
Senator Jaquez Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 188 on third reading and final passage and ask for your aye vote.
Is there any discussion? Senator Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we spoke at this at length yesterday about this bill, and I appreciate the opportunity to do so once again. I do have very serious concerns with Senate Bill 188 before us now. because this bill combined with the next one and the bill from last year and even an executive order that was passed, when we look at the overall package of what the state of Colorado is doing, we are signaling to the rest of the union and to the world that post-Dobbs and post the overturning of Roe v. Wade, that Colorado will proudly end the life of any unborn child at any time during pregnancy. Moreover, with this bill, we will resist any investigation by law enforcement into an abortion provider or their records, especially if an investigation begins in another state. Almost a year ago, we codified one of the most extreme abortion laws in the world, a law that is totally unacceptable by European standards, and with the exception of just 6 other nations, including China and North Korea, if someone wants to end the life of a child moments before delivery, they should not come to the United States generally, but specifically to the state of Colorado. The intent of this bill, combined with those other pieces of legislation and executive orders, seems to invite anyone wanting an abortion to come to our state to end the life of their child. I think that is wrong. These bills and the blocking of all abortion-related investigations or inquiries from parents or law enforcement create 2 very serious problems. First, those who sexually traffic young girls and women resort to forcing their victims to have abortions in order to hide the effects and to continue their abuse. We know this, but the bill before us further compounds the ability to stop sex trafficking in the efforts of law enforcement. In an effort to frustrate abortion bans that are happening outside of the state of Colorado, this bill mandates that Colorado agencies hide abortion data from law enforcement in those states. At best, this will slow sex trafficking investigations, which will slow arrests and slow the rescues of victimized women. At worst, it will block their investigations entirely. Again, coupled with this in the governor's signature on 1279 last year, mandating that Colorado no longer interfere in any way with an abortion, the message, however intended, is clear. And to sex traffickers, it is as well. If a perpetrator wants the best chance to avoid detection from the abortion itself, come to Colorado, where even reasonable basic oversight and reporting requirements could be deemed as interference. And under this bill, it is unlikely Colorado will share anything about an abortion that could help law enforcement from Colorado and especially from other states from stopping sex trafficking. This bill also has the effect of blocking parents from basic information about their children. What if something goes wrong with a prescribed medication? What if something goes wrong with an abortion or any other procedure? A parent or doctor from, say, Wyoming or another state, a parent of a 14, 13, 15, 16-year-old would have zero access to basic information about their children. Members, parents should not be blocked from basic knowledge about various serious procedures affecting their children. And let's talk about the local zoning restrictions in the bill. A local government that does not want to be a destination for brutal, heinous, late-term abortion, we've seen this in the last several months in the state of Colorado. They don't want to be a destination for dismembering babies who feel pain, the same as you and me. Under this bill, local government will lose their ability to make that choice. After 7 weeks, a baby responds to outside things like light, changes in the movements of the mom, sometimes dreams. Not long after that, at 16 weeks, I believe, the baby feels pain fully, same as you and I. If a local government does not want to be the destination of those kinds of procedures, of late-term abortion, which is heinous, this bill blocks that local government from being able to do anything about it. Members, I urge a no vote on this. It is wrong. It promotes a culture of death.
Minority Leader Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rise in opposition to Senate Bill 188 and urge your rejection of this concept. The bill, as we discussed at length yesterday, my perspective, my interpretation, you are certainly welcome to your own, is unnecessary on its face, doesn't really gain us any ground, but it does have the effect of creating greater protections for kind of an ascendant, overreaching protection of abortion providers. It does so, in my perspective and in my interpretation, in a way that puts at risk the very individuals that the abortion providers would seek to serve. A set piece within the bill is found on pages 15 and 16 with regard to medical malpractice actions. Kind of tells the whole story in a couple of paragraphs. It says, any medical malpractice action brought in this state against a healthcare provider licensed, registered, or certified in this state or in another or a territory shall not allow evidence or witness testimony relating to professional discipline or criminal or civil charges in this state or another state or United States territory, regardless of disposition or outcome, concerning the provision or assistance in the provision of a legally protected healthcare activity as defined in this bill, so long as the care provided did not violate Colorado law. The reality is, if there is a pattern of behavior, if there is a provider who is having difficulties, who is not getting positive outcomes but getting adverse outcomes, this bill would have a chilling effect on actually gathering the information, understanding what's going on. You can't gather the information so long as the care provided did not violate Colorado law. The reality is, the broad outline of providing an abortion is allowed under Colorado law. If, however, the situation goes badly, information cannot be gathered because there is an intended or unintended protection built into the law. So I rise in opposition to the bill, principally in support of the people who would seek care from these providers that now have levels of protection that I believe is inappropriate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Or shall I say Madam President? I rise in support of Senate Bill 188 and want to thank everyone who came and testified yesterday in regards to, who came and testified in committee in regards to the policy. And I also want to extend my appreciation to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for the strong debate that we had on this policy. I will be really honest in that I don't think I was anticipating well, we passed REA last year, so this is a settled question, line of argument. And so I wanted to share a bit of information to demonstrate exactly why this policy is so deeply needed in this moment here in Colorado now. Around the national landscape, as of January 2023, 24 states have banned abortion or will likely try to do so in the near future. After the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade in June of last year, at least 66 clinics in 15 states have stopped offering abortion care. States with more abortion restrictions have maternal and infant mortality rates that are a horrific 62% higher than states where abortion is more easily accessible. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, in his most recent budget, allocated additional funds to their DOC specifically for the anticipated increase of women and doctors being jailed. This fall, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita directed the state medical board to discipline a doctor after she provided an abortion to a 10-year-old rape victim who traveled to Indiana from Ohio. Lizelle Herrera, a young woman in Texas, was briefly jailed this past April and charged with murder for causing the death of an individual by a self-induced abortion. The hospital where she had checked in after taking abortion pills reported her to the sheriff's office, and her bond was set at $500,000. Medical students and residents are now at risk of not being trained in the full spectrum of reproductive health care. Here in Colorado, U.S. Representative Doug Lamborn has introduced 3 bills in Congress designed to limit abortion care within the state, in spite of RHEA. He's introduced the Second Chance at Life Act, requiring medical providers to give patients information about reversing a medical abortion, a procedure that ACOG calls unproven and unethical. He's also introduced the Preventing Abortion Sanctuaries Act and the Recognizing the Unborn Act. Representative Lauren Boebert's anti-trans rhetoric was highlighted after the November shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs. She calls gender-affirming care grooming. That chaos that we are seeing in other states, the constantly changing laws, bans, and rhetoric, increases the pressure on Colorado providers and clinics. Our state is now the closest abortion provider for 1.2 million people seeking abortion care in neighboring states. And clinics in our state have seen a 33% rise in the number of patients since the Dobbs decision. That's why this policy matters. That's why we are so proud to do this work. Because we know that reproductive justice and LGBTQ+ equality go hand in hand in the fight to access quality-affirming health care. And we remain committed to ensuring that all people can access the health care that we need to make our own decisions about our own bodies in a way that respects and honors autonomy and being able to live as your full, true, authentic self. I ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 188.
Senator Zinzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I wanted to come down a few times yesterday and talk on this issue, but every time an amendment would come up or I would see an opportunity, it seemed like the conversation was headed in an entirely different direction than the comments that I wanted to make. So I thought, no, this isn't the right moment. This isn't the right time. So I held off. And even today, I'm not even sure how to form the words that I am thinking when it comes to this bill. But I feel like if I pass up my opportunity to share with why this bill is so important to me, then I'm doing a disservice to other parents like me. And across the country right now, lawmakers have introduced legislation that restricts transgender health care for minors. At least 8 states have passed laws or policies restricting this care, and 23 more state legislatures are considering similar legislation of their own. And medical experts say that understanding transgender identities, gender dysphoria, and how gender-affirming treatments work is key to understanding the impact that these bans may have on patients. Quote, when it becomes too political, it becomes more about paying attention to very short sentences, but not paying attention to nuance, says Dr. Hussein Abdul Latif, who is a pediatric endocrinologist at Children's Hospital of Alabama. He focuses very specifically on gender care. And he says that that's unfortunate, and I agree with him, because this is not something that is simple. Gender-affirming care helps treat gender dysphoria, which refers to the stress of feeling as if you were in a body that doesn't match your own feelings about yourself. People experiencing gender dysphoria may feel that their physical body does not match their inner self of who they are, and that they do not desire the gender that is typically associated with what they are assigned at birth. And this causes distress, depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, and sometimes suicide itself. However, it's really important to know that being transgender is not a mental illness. Being transgendered is not the problem. The problem, and the problem that I think this bill seeks to address, is having access to care. My family right now is being impacted by laws that are being passed outside of the state of Colorado. It's being impacted by the decisions outside of the border of this state, and it is having real consequences on my family and my children. And I feel it's really important that we protect the laws and the providers and the ability to provide gender-affirming care that we currently have in the state to the maximum ability. And that it is unfair for laws outside of this state to impact that. And so with that, I ask for your support of this bill for me, for my family, and for the hundreds of other families that are experiencing this situation, so that their children and others can have that gender-affirming care that they need in order to live.
Senator Hawkins Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't think that I could have said it any better myself than what we just heard from the Senator of Arvada. It's a very personal issue why I decided to join this bill, and I'm so honored and want to acknowledge the tremendous work that the very amazing senator from Denver did. She was a leader in all three of these bills in last year's efforts. The coalition that we worked with on these bills are very passionate and the coalitions are large, and there's a reason for that. Women, families, so many people in Colorado are very scared. And that was why we worked so hard to pass these bills. As a member of the LGBTQ caucus, really from the moment that I was elected, we just feel like we are being singled out more so than other electeds. You know, last year at this time, at Easter, I was sitting with friends, and all of a sudden, I get a text from a fellow caucus mate. And there we were. It was a picture of the LGBTQ caucus, which was much smaller last year. And every one of them, we had a target on us. And it was called Groomers of Colorado. I'm not trying to be facetious or silly about this, but I had to actually say groomers. I wasn't even sure what that was. And then we all got on a call and we realized what was happening. This past month, I went to a town hall in Longmont City Council, and I had a woman come within 5 feet of me and say, why are you helping these trans people? And then looked at me and said, transgender people kill youth. She looked in my face and said, transgender people kill youth. Well, it just happened to be the same time that the CPAC speaker was saying transgender folks need to be eradicated. That's why we work so hard on Senate Bill 188. Colorado, people are fleeing to Colorado because we can provide protection. We can feel safe here. This bill goes such a long way in doing that. I don't know why in the world we would not want to protect our healthcare providers. These are our frontline heroes who just got us through one of the worst public health crises in the history of our country. Over 1 million Americans died. Who saved those lives? Public healthcare workers, and they're being thrown in jail or arrested in other states. That's why we worked on this bill. It is absurd what is going on in other states. Colorado can lead the way in protecting all of these folks. We are an inclusive state. That's why we're doing this bill. I was really honored to work on it. Again, I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to support this. So with that being said, ask for your aye vote. Senate Bill 188.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I had resolved to keep my seat this morning about this bill, but I break my resolution. I had resolved that I would do the best I could to go to lunch today, but I find that as I listen to the debate, I could be silent no longer about Senate Bill 188. You know, the main, I have to say, Mr. President, speaking to you, I am resentful of the assertion that I do not want to protect physicians in Colorado and other healthcare providers because I oppose Senate Bill 188. I take issue with that. I believe after the passage of the Reproductive Health Equity Act and its provisions, and the Constitution of the United States, and the Constitution of the state of Colorado, and the legal principles that flow therefrom, that the healthcare providers of Colorado, whatever I think about various forms of reproductive health, those providers are well protected in our state to do what they believe is appropriate in accordance with the standard of care. I think I said over and over last evening that the problem with Senate Bill 188 is it aims to restate the existing protections for healthcare providers in Colorado that legally exist, and in doing so, extends those protections to the point and to the detriment of those who are pregnant in Colorado, who might now find themselves in a position to receive substandard care from a physician who receives protection beyond the standard of care. There was material in the committee hearing from noted and experienced proponents who referred to this bill as prophylactic in nature. Meaning that we're going to anticipate all of the problems that might occur, that I would contend to you will be readily resolved in the court, as they will be whether or not we pass Senate Bill 188. But recall that we had to have an amendment yesterday, and I appreciate the fact that the proponents of the bill recognize that their bill was going to protect physicians who provided substandard care as it was written. And it was only because an amendment was offered, not across the way in committee hearing, but on second reading. And thank goodness, because I had a note in my bill during committee hearing, because I'd only been able to see this bill for maybe 48 hours at most, along with several others that are lengthy, to say this is a problem. Hope we can fix it, say my notes. I'm glad that we did. This bill contains things like protection against ex parte wiretap orders that would not be granted by a court in this state because all that one was doing was providing legally protected reproductive health care services, even if that request came from another state. But that provision goes so far in its language that I believe the fraudulent health care provider who happens to be in the reproductive health care business that has a wiretap granted, perhaps, will seek to suppress that evidence and say, you can't wiretap my phone to find out that I'm defrauding the taxpayers. Will they win that? Probably not. Will they do that? They came to my office and I was in that business. I'd take that shot because probably not is not certainly not, and if you suppress that, the criminal goes free. That's what's wrong with Senate Bill 188. That's what my objection is to Senate Bill 188. My objection is not that it protects healthcare providers, and my opposition is not because I don't want to protect them, or for that matter, that I don't want to extend the protections of the Colorado and federal constitutions and our state laws to every citizen, no matter what their orientation might be, no matter what their race, ethnicity, religion, age. Members, this bill is ill-conceived. It does more than it needs to, and we do not need any of these things based upon the current law that we have and the Constitution that we have. I ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion is the adoption and passage of Senate Bill 188. Are there any no votes? Mr. Minority Leader, Senators Gardner, Rich, Baisley, Will, Van Winkle, Simpson, Pelton R, Pelton B, Liston, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood, Priola. With a vote of 23 ayes, 13 noes, 22 ayes, 13 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 188 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Rodriguez, Coker, Hansen, Bridges, Cutter, Winter, Buckner, Henriksen, Danielson, Mullica, Sullivan, Janal, Fields, Finberg. Please add the President. Would the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 189?
Senate Bill 189 by Senators Moreno and Cutter, Representatives Michelson, Janay, and Garcia, concerning increasing access to reproductive health care services and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 189 on third reading and final passage and request permission to offer a third reading amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Will you please explain the need for a third reading amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, the need for a third reading amendment arises out of the validation that the senator from Parker is always right.
Amazing explanation for a third reading amendment. The question before the body is Majority Leader Moreno's request for permission to offer a third reading amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it and permission is granted. Would the clerk please read the title to Amendment L02A?
Amendment L028.
Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Amendment L028.
To L028, Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we had some discussion on this issue on second reading. Essentially, the provisions had to do with the high deductible health plan and whether or not the language with a health savings account should be included in the bill. The gist of it is, after a lot of discussions with the Division of Insurance, that the senator from Parker was correct, that that language should not be in there. And so that's what this amendment seeks to accomplish. I will note that I know that the senator from Parker doesn't always love my bills, but I always appreciate his thought partnership on them. The other provisions of the amendment, you'll see some capital letters on lines 5 through 9. That's actually technical. There was an amendment added in the Health and Human Services Committee, but it was added in small type, which would suggest that it's an existing section of statute, that is not the case. We are actually adding additional language, which is why the capital letters are needed. Lastly, to do with HIV prevention drugs, we set out two standards, one that would allow for an actuarial analysis on the removal of prior authorization, step therapy, cost containment measures on getting HIV medication. We added a repeal clause so that the legislature would be able to evaluate that actuarial analysis and make a decision if that policy choice should continue. This also adds that repeal language to another section where it would determine whether the removal of step therapy prior authorization should continue for new drugs as well. And again, that should be a policy choice made by the legislature at that time after the actuarial analysis has been reviewed. I request your support for Amendment L028.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motions for the adoption of Amendment L028 to Senate Bill 189. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Amendment L28 is adopted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, colleagues. In the flurry of activity on second reading and adopting in very quick fashion all of those amendments, I neglected to just say a couple of words about the importance of this bill. I have worked really hard during my tenure in the legislature to expand as much as possible getting medication to HIV patients, knowing that the advances in medicine have allowed us to prolong the lives of these patients. And so this is the next logical step in pursuit of that goal. The other piece is obviously, it is my belief that we should offer the full suite of reproductive health care services in our state, and having insurance cover those is a necessary step, in my opinion, to make sure that folks have that choice when it comes to their health care. And so the provisions of Senate Bill 189 are important. They, I think, are the next step in making sure that access isn't just protected, but that people can actually get it. And that's what Senate Bill 189 seeks to do.
Senator Cutter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm very regretful that I wasn't able to be here with my co-prime yesterday to defend this bill. So I just want to say how proud I am to be a co-prime sponsor on this bill. The voters were loud and clear in Colorado, and we've established that access to a full range of reproductive care is something we value, and the key word there is access. Reproductive care is health care, and insurance should cover a full range of people's health care. Taking care of all of healthcare needs is an investment in a thriving society, and comprehensive reproductive care is a critical piece of that picture. Existing gaps in our coverage of reproductive care can cause significant barriers to access. So ultimately, the decision to have children or not is one of the most emotionally and economically impactful decisions for families. It has implications for an individual's financial well-being, job security, workforce participation, and educational attainment. So I'm really pleased to sponsor this, and I ask for your aye vote.
Senator Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of course, by now, because we have been talking about these bills ad nauseum, I am going to be a no vote on this bill. But I do want the majority leader to know that during all of this, he has been a complete gentleman during the debate, and I so appreciate that. But I still have problems with the fact that I believe this bill continues to discriminate against women who have made the choice to have a child. And I cannot support this bill knowing that. And for those of you who have contacted our offices from various districts asking us to vote no on this bill, I want you to know that I thank you for your choice, and I thank you for having that child. Mr. President, I ask for a no vote.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Appreciate the comments from the majority leader, although you all know he's being overly magnanimous, and I wish I was right all the time. That would make my life a whole lot easier. But either way, I appreciate the comments, appreciate the amendment because it was necessary. But unfortunately, for the proponents of this bill, because that amendment was necessary, I owe all of you an apology, because I try to be really precise with my numbers, and I told you yesterday that because of how many people in our state are either uninsured or covered by military plans or covered by Medicaid or covered by Medicare or on ERISA, partially self-funded or self-funded plans, that only 8.5% of the citizens of Colorado would be covered under this bill. 91.5% of Coloradans would not be impacted in this bill. And I apologize to the other sponsor who wasn't here to hear me say that yesterday, because it's probably maybe unfair to be springing this on her right before she mentions at the well that this is going to provide access. So it's probably not fair, so I'll try to be judicious with my comments. But I told you that 8.5% of Coloradans would be covered, 91.5% would not. The amendment that you just adopted excludes all federally qualified high-deductible health insurance plans from this bill as well. You just voted to exclude all high-deductible health insurance plans, not because you wanted to, not because you were misled by the sponsors, because you had to. That's the federal law. You can't have first dollar coverage for things like that, and it's not the state's fault. It's simply it's a federal rule. It is what it is. So I am looking at an article from 60 days ago, January 30th, 2023. This is from a division of LendingTree called Value Penguin. Value Penguin gets their data, analyze data from the State Health Compare Tool, which aggregates the rate of U.S. private sector workers enrolled in the high-deductible health plans nationally and by state. Annual plan averages for employer-sponsored HDHPs for the 2022 year are via the Kaiser Family Foundation 2022 Employer Health Benefits Survey. That's where this data is coming from. The title of the article is Rate of Workers Enrolled in High-Deductible Health Plans Jumps for the 8th Straight Year to a Record 55.7%. That's the national statistics. So if we were doing this nationally, the amendment that you just adopted carves over half the people out of your bill. Colorado, I don't know if you know this, we are very progressive as a state in a number of ways, including in adoption of high-deductible health insurance plans. We were, in my opinion, as somebody in the industry, we're kind of the leaders. We're kind of the market leaders in high-deductible health plans. Colorado currently ranks number 5 in the country as far as the rate of private sector workers enrolled in HDHPs. Number 5. Anybody want to guess what percent of Coloradans in private sector plans are covered under the HDHPs that you just voted to exclude from this bill? 2/3. 66%. That's what we just voted to adopt. So I was wrong in the numbers when I said 8.5% of Coloradans would be impacted by this bill, and we need to be careful during the bill signing and when you do your press release and the town halls and the newsletters, when we say, we finally increased access for abortion services in the state of Colorado. Abortions are now going to be free if you have health insurance in the state of Colorado. I cautioned you because you were only going to be speaking to 8.5 people out of every 100 Coloradans. And I was way off. You're actually only going to be speaking to 3 out of every 100 Coloradans when you say, you get free reproductive health care, you get free abortions in the state of Colorado. It's about 3 out of 100. Now, to be fair, that's worst case scenario. That's the law as it comes out of the gate, covering large group plans that aren't self-funded where the member is not enrolled in a high-deductible health insurance plan. So when your constituents come up to you and say, so do I get free abortions? Those are the questions you have to ask. Do you get your insurance privately, number one, because remember, if they're on Medicare, Medicaid, they definitely don't get it. Are you on a self-funded plan? Are you on a large group plan? Meaning, does your employer have more or less than 100 full-time equivalent employees? If the answer is yes, then is that a self-funded plan? And if the answer is no, then it's, are you on a high-deductible health insurance plan? And if the answer is no, then the answer is yes, you get free abortions in the state of Colorado. About 3 out of 100 people. According to the bill, the state of Colorado is now going to go to the federal government and see if we could get this expanded into the individual and the small group marketplaces. You'll remember me talking about that yesterday. I told you best case scenario, you would pick up another 4% of Coloradans if we picked up the individual market, which you won't. Sorry, I hate to rain on anybody's parade, but you're not. It's not going to happen. But now we're only talking about 1/3 of 4%. So call it another 1.5% of Coloradans. And we have to ask if this will be adopted in the small group marketplace, and I don't know the answer to that. My guess is, based on everything I've tried to run when we went to the federal government, and it was for a lot of things, the answer will be no. But let's say it's not. We'll pick up another 5%, but again, I was wrong with that number. It's not going to be 5%. It's going to be 1/3 of 5%. So round up, call it 2%. So somewhere between 3 out of 100 people or 6.5 out of 100 people are the ones that we need to be speaking to when we make the proclamations that we're really expanding access to abortions in the state of Colorado, because those are the numbers, colleagues. And can always say, wise person told me once, and I'm going to screw the anecdote up, I'm sure, but we do what we can for who we can for as long as we can, something like that. And to that wise person, I would say for this bill, that's 3 to 6.5% of the state of Colorado is what we're impacting with this. But you've heard this exact same argument from me when we talked about in vitro fertilization. Everybody's going to have that coverage here in the state of Colorado, and as you know, it turned out that way. It didn't work. The bill's not expansive enough to really make a dent. But that's not the reason why I'm a no vote. And as I said on the mic yesterday, it pains me immensely to be a no vote on this bill because I so support 80% of what this bill is trying to do, particularly around the work for either patients with AIDS or those trying to avoid the HIV virus and the miracle that is modern medicine that even allows us to have this conversation, right? This was a pipe dream 30 years ago that we'd be having this conversation. So I'm really, really in support of all of that, but the hard no for me is when we start playing favorites. It was tough for me to sit in my seat as we talked about cancer patients today with tributes after the votes yesterday, where we had an opportunity to put cancer patients on a level playing field with HIV patients. We had a chance to put cardiovascular disease patients on a level playing field with HIV patients, not taking anything away from HIV patients, just creating a level playing field. And everybody voted that down, even with no impact to the insurance industry. It was really disheartening for me because, I shouldn't say everybody. Thank you, that's fair.
Senator Smallwood, would you like to go into your second 10 minutes?
Yeah, actually, Mr. President, if I could,
Please.
if you'd indulge me, I'd appreciate it.
Please.
Thank you, sir. So I would have really liked to have seen that amendment. I feel like that would have made this a much better bill, and I wish that we could have had the conversation separately. I wish that we could have had the HIV, AIDS, testing and treatment conversation, and then we could have had the let's expand free abortions to 3 out of every 100 Coloradans conversation. Because that would be the same conversation that we had around in vitro fertilization coverage, which is Are we really helping people, or are we creating more confusion? And that's the last piece that I want to leave you with. I can't remember how many people were in the room when we talked about the fear that I have when it comes to ostensibly protecting young people from their parents, guardians, custodians finding out about the reproductive health care that they were getting. The arguments and concerns that I hear when I go to the proponents of this concept, when I say to them, why is it so important for you that children of any age can get abortions without parental notification or parental consent? And what I hear back almost every time, not every time, but almost every time is, Senator, you don't understand. There are a lot of really, really terrible parents out there, terrible guardians, terrible custodians, and if those people find out that this young person sought an IUD or an abortion or even birth control pills, it's not going to be good for that young person. That's what I hear back, and it makes perfect sense to me. And I can actually see the argument. I don't really agree with it, and we talked about that yesterday. But I see their point of view, and I feel like I understand it. But that's what makes this bill so potentially dangerous to that young person. Because what's going to happen is, what I fear might happen is that somebody gets clumsy. Probably not any of you. But there's a lot of people in the lobby, a lot of proponents, a lot of activists. And I worry that somebody's going to get clumsy and leak out misinformation like abortions are free in the state of Colorado, or IUDs are free, or IUSs are free, or a Norplant, implantable temporary sterilization is free. That misinformation is going to leak out. And that young person who's covered under their parents' insurance or under their guardian's insurance is going to go seek that care without parental notification and certainly without parental consent because, according to the proponents, it's dangerous for her to do otherwise. We're going to sneak around, get these services performed, and there is a 97% chance that she's wrong. And there's no way for her to know. And I would submit to you, there's no way for her physician to know. Did you all look at your ID cards like I asked? Just to see if you could find any indication whatsoever that you're on a fully insured plan or a self-funded plan? Any indication, any weird code, little numbers on the bottom, something like that. So if I don't know, and if you don't know, how's a 16-year-old going to know? So they're going to go seek out that care, and what is the first thing that's going to happen when that provider bills the insurance, which they will? I don't know about you, I don't know a lot of providers that work for free anymore. It's not Little House on the Prairie anymore. So they're going to bill that provider. An EOB is going to be generated. It's going to be folded up in paper. It's going to be dropped in an envelope and mailed to the parent's house, the one that we were so concerned would find out about it. It's going to list right on there who the provider was, how much it cost, and the best part, here's the patient's responsibility. Here's what you owe, mom, dad. And now that parent, guardian, custodian is going to have that conversation with that young person who has a 97% chance of not getting a free abortion. How's that conversation going to go? I have to think that the proponents haven't thought this stuff through. Because if they had, it would be utterly irresponsible for them to propose something like this in the first place that's going to work so infrequently. Colleagues, we're amending things on third reading to make sure that they comply with federal law. Did nobody else ask these questions? I saw the news articles and the press releases. It did not, there was nothing in there that said Colorado legislators propose to provide free abortions to 3% of Colorado residents. Or best case scenario, 5%. I'm really worried that, and I've only been studying this for a couple of weeks. I haven't even really spent that much time with it. I know from the 2 weeks of studying that I did that I'm a no vote on this. What else haven't we thought of in this? What are the other unintended consequences that somebody way smarter than me and who's right way more often than me is going to point out? There are people that have been doing this a lot longer than I have. So at the end of the day, what have we really done with this bill? Provide confusion. I guess provide talking points if somebody was going to be insincere. I don't think anybody in this room would do that. But I begged you yesterday, I implore you today, make sure that when you're speaking of this, when your aides, your staffers, the proponents, the other activists, when they are tempted to say something like what you heard at the well today, which was we are expanding access to abortions, got to be really careful with that. Consequences could just be annoying and financial, like, oh, I thought it was going to be free and it's not, and I got to pay $500 or whatever. Or if what the proponents tell me why the elimination of notification and consent is so critical, what are we doing to those kids? I appreciate your time, colleagues.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 189. Are there any no votes? Minority Leader Lundeen. Senators Gardner, Rich, Baisley, Will, Van Winkle, Simpson, Pelton R, Pelton B, Liston, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood. With a vote of 23 ayes, 12 noes, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 189 is passed. Co-sponsors, Senators Gonzalez, Janal, Fields, Finberg, Buckner, Winter, Hendrickson, Danielson, Jaquez Lewis, Sullivan. Please add the President. Will the clerk please read the title to Senate Bill 190?
Senate Bill 190, Senators Winter F. and Marchman, Representatives McCormick and Epps concerning policies to make punishable deceptive actions regarding pregnancy-related services.
Senator Marchman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move SB 190 on third reading and final passage and urge an aye vote.
Senator Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'm here to address my constituents, good people from the counties of Chaffee, Custer, Douglas, Fremont, Jefferson, Lake, Park, and Teller about Senate Bill 23-190. So friends, you may think in reading 190 that you're living in a George Orwell fantasy. Senate Bill 190 is about eliminating access to the procedure of reversing a medical abortion. A medical abortion works by using a combination of two drugs that, when used together, induce an abortion. First drug works by blocking progesterone, and without progesterone, the uterine lining will thin and the embryo will not stay attached. Then a second drug is taken within 48 hours of the first drug, causing the uterus to contract, bleed, and expel the embryo. Now, Senate Bill 190 purports to ensure women's rights by taking away one very intimate and personal right, that is the pregnant woman's ability to receive augmented doses of progesterone to reverse a medically induced abortion if they change their mind within the first couple of days. Senate Bill 190 purports to ensure women's access to accurate information from qualified medical professionals by threatening doctors who would supply that information. It's a legislative version of canceling like we see on social media. Also, the insulting and incendiary language in this bill is unprecedented. It's lashing out against crisis pregnancy centers. The good senator from Colorado Springs stated yesterday that he'd never seen anything like it in his 15 years in the legislature. Now, last night I emailed the bill's drafter and asked how such unprofessional language got into this bill because I was terrifically surprised at the vitriol. Now, she responded that the state capitol's version of client privilege prevents her from revealing the source of the bill's bitter outburst, which I certainly understand. But it reads like it was written by a competitor to the medical services who provide reversal treatments. It's full of bias, antagonism, and is shamefully lacking in decorum. Could this be one corporate monopoly squashing its competitors through strategic legislation? So, constituents, I urge you to dust off your old high school copy of 1984. In that book, George Orwell lived out government overreach to its logical conclusion, restricting your behavior while telling you that it constitutes your liberty. If you like Senate Bill 190, you're going to love Big Brother. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Pelton B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard yesterday that medical abortion reversal was unprofessional conduct to provide, prescribe, administer, or attempt. A woman is still pregnant after she takes the first abortion pill. There's 2 of them, and she's still pregnant. Shouldn't she have the choice to keep that child that she's carrying? The very same medicine that my wife and I used to have a viable pregnancy is used to reverse the abortion pill. In Colorado, a pregnant individual has the fundamental right to continue a pregnancy. I'm asking today that we still allow women the choice to continue their pregnancy. I ask for a no vote.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. President, I apologize. I'll pay a fine. This bill is 100% about choice and informed choice. Get counseling when you're pregnant from a healthcare provider of your choice, but understand what services they provide and don't provide. If they provide emergency contraception, if they provide abortion services, if they provide vasectomies, if they provide STI testing, if they are held to HIPAA standards, understand what you are walking into. If you choose to walk into a faith-based clinic, that is your choice. But it should be an informed choice. When we are talking about abortion reversal, We are not saying women cannot continue their pregnancy. The first line of the bill is that folks can decide to end their pregnancy and abortion or carry their pregnancy to full term. But how can we, in good conscience, let people think they can reverse their abortion with no scientific evidence, and when all the medical experts are saying that it is unethical and experimental? We aren't saying progesterone is dangerous. We're not saying that progesterone should not be used. We're saying to say that it reverses abortion is unproven, it's unethical, and it's experimental. We were asked to bring in medical experts, which we did in an amendment. We now have 3 medical boards. In committee, we were asked to send it to the medical boards. We are sending it to the medical experts to ensure that we are informing people in Colorado about what is real and what is not.
Senator Van Winkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. My apologies. And we did just hear that this bill is about informed choice. I do believe that is correct. I believe it takes a woman's right to informed choice. It takes away her right to make a choice and to be informed. It takes away a woman's right also to change her mind. This bill has 2 very different sections, and they're almost entirely unrelated, but one is about receiving information in free speech. The other is about the right to change her mind and use a proven natural occurring medicine. The one section of the bill, the state legislature, we are forcing and using our power of government to force ourselves in between the patient and her doctor regarding the use of progesterone. And we all have received, I don't know, maybe it's just because I was on the Judiciary Committee and I listened to the hours and hours of testimony of medical experts that are far smarter than I am when it comes to this field about the safety and efficacy of progesterone. But we have all received probably hundreds of emails from mainly registered nurses and OBGYN physicians. And many of them read somewhat similarly. Many of them say things like this: progesterone does not harm a pregnant patient or a baby in any manner whatsoever. If Colorado truly believes that reproductive rights are to be left to the choices of a patient and her physician, then you must vote against this bill that prohibits a physician from prescribing a safe medication to a woman who is trying to control what happens with the pregnancy she is carrying. Progesterone, this is another one, is a safe, proven medication. Taking progesterone after taking the first abortion pill is a decision made by a woman. It is her choice and her decision. To quote one OBGYN physician, voting for this bill as written is voting against patient autonomy, voting against the sanctity and privacy of the patient-physician relationship, and voting for a non-medical personnel to dictate medical therapy based on their personal ethics as opposed to the patient's personal beliefs. Now, the bill was amended yesterday, but to be clear, it makes it illegal to prescribe progesterone for this use unless dozens and dozens and dozens of doctors, nurses, medical professionals, and others can come to 100% full agreement between the signage of this bill in October, which will be very little time. Now, going back to the second part of the bill, the very first line of the bill, actually, section 1, subsection A, says, in Colorado, a pregnant individual has a fundamental right to terminate a pregnancy by abortion. Now, this is a question I asked several times in committee, and it was determined that nowhere in the constitutional jurisprudence is choosing to end the life of a baby by elective abortion enumerated as a fundamental right. But members, let's talk about some fundamental rights. All human beings have basic natural rights. And the most fundamental of these rights, I believe, is the right to life. I further argue that the right to life belongs to all humans, regardless of their age, dependency, or their ability. Members, let us not confuse human value with human function. By assuming babies are not human, or by assuming that babies are, yes, they are humans, but to say, no, they are not persons fully endowed with rights. None of us in this room here today have the same IQ. None of us are the same size, we're not the same age, or at the same level of development. I'm sure I can do a few more push-ups than a few other members, and a few other members have a higher IQ than I do. But that doesn't make, we do have our human nature in common. All functions in state of human development comes in varying degrees, but does that mean our rights also therefore come in varying degrees? I say no, clearly not. It should not be. Now, on to the section of the bill, the other section of the bill that targets pro-life organizations and aims to block pro-life information. The speech this bill targets is speech that could awaken the moral intuitions of a mom. I believe that's why it's targeting this speech. It's speech that could save a life. It's speech that could let a mom know about adoption possibilities by a family desperately seeking a child, or to let a mom know that there can be help provided to her with things like diapers, formula. Even there are organizations that help pay moms' rents, that pay their cell phone bills. This is information that could be helpful to them in a time of need. Members, it is easy to be pro-choice when the choice isn't legitimate and the thought of choosing life is blocked from the public arena. If a court ever wonders if this bill truly does single out pro-life organizations or pro-life speech, just check the legislative declaration, both as amended as it is today and how it was introduced. It is blatant discrimination against speech and pregnancy resource centers. Now, I've read from a combination of nurses and OBGYNs about progesterone, and I've read clearly my thoughts on the right to life. But let me read one more thing from a constituent who is submitting testimony in strong opposition to this bill. She was faced with the decision after college when she was raped at gunpoint by a man. She was told, I'll skip that part, it's very personal. He was a very prominent person in a small community in which I lived, and a restraining order only made things worse for me. This is her speaking, of course. I became pregnant, and the only option I was given at the clinic was to abort my baby. They stated that an abortion would, quote, solve my problem, but the baby was not the problem. And it did not solve my problem as the baby was not the problem. It really added 10 problems, the abortion that is. The perpetrator was the problem, and we seldom prosecute them, but punish the woman and the baby by killing the baby. All my options were never presented to me, and I hear this many times as women who I know made that choice. They were not counseled to all their choices, but only one, to terminate. I found out about pregnancy care centers several years later, and I wish I at least had the choice to know and be educated on my options, which is what pregnancy care centers offer. I understand that 3,300 women in the United States have recently changed their minds after taking abortion pills and successfully reversed the effects, and their babies went on to be born healthy without any effects to the mom from these progesterone pills that were prescribed to them. I oppose this bill that would take away women's right to choose and change her mind, the right to her alternatives, and to know and be educated about her options at any time through the support and helps of a pregnancy care center. Nothing these centers offer is deceitful or misleading. They actually are pro-choice, and that they give women the choice to be educated and supported. The only thing they do not offer, in most cases, is abortion or referrals for abortion. There are plenty of providers that do that. These same centers, I'll skip to the end due to time. If you're truly for choice, then don't pass Senate Bill 190. That at its core does not support women, but rather limits options and potentially can do to them immense physical harm and psychological harm long term. Thank you for listening to my story. I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 190. Members, Just like the many constituents that text me, emailed me, contacted me, urging for a no vote on this, I ask for a no vote as well. This bill is wrong. It misleads. It denies choice. And supports, again, the culture of death. Please vote no.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I urge a no vote on Senate Bill 23-190. Actually, the first thing you read when you read this bill is the title, which is concerning policies to make punishable deceptive actions regarding pregnancy-related services. That's what you read first. Rather than actually accomplishing anything, this bill seeks to eliminate alternatives to abortion. Though the language of the bill prohibits a person from engaging in a deceptive trade practice, the legislative declaration and title of the bill make it very clear that crisis pregnancy centers, or as they're termed in the bill, anti-abortion centers, are being targeted because of their beliefs. This bill hinders freedom of speech. It's clear. Just because people say that it doesn't mean that it doesn't hinder freedom of speech. The purpose of these crisis pregnancy centers is to show women, demonstrate to women, let women know that there are alternatives to abortion. And members, even if you wish to ignore the political propaganda this bill tries to pass off as necessary legislation for the good of people, Colorado already has existing laws preventing deceptive trade practices. The unfair deceptive trade practices in Colorado Revised Statute 6-1-105 already prohibits people, businesses from falsely advertising their practice or services. This bill also focuses on what deems the pseudoscience of abortion reversal pills and alleges these pills are dangerous. Yet, the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they still count. They are still physicians, even though they're pro-life. But the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists supports the use of the abortion pill reversal. They've stated very clearly in their position paper from 2019 that natural progesterone, which is what's used, has been safely used during pregnancy for decades without undesired effects, and it has been used to help women carry their babies to full term. The National Library of Medicine at the National Legal Center, the reversal of the effects of the first pill taken in a chemical abortion using progesterone is safe and effective. The American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists strongly supports laws which require women to be informed of the option of the abortion pill rescue as part of a woman's right to informed consent prior to abortion. But if these physicians ensure that pregnant women, their patients, are informed, and if they give them the treatment, administer the treatment, under this bill, they can be declared to have conduct that is unprofessional. It's been said, in our state, a woman has a fundamental right to make a decision about the individual's reproductive health. That's what was in 1279 last year. In this bill, it says a fundamental right to continue a pregnancy. It is a woman's right to choose life for their child. That's what's meant by a fundamental right to continue a pregnancy. It's a woman's right to choose life for their child, whether they are carrying that child in their arms or carrying their child in the womb. It is their right to choose life. And for some women, that means she should be able to choose the abortion rescue plan treatment or the abortion reversal pill. That is her right to make that choice. That should be her choice. Passing this bill will put that right in jeopardy and will put up a barrier to choosing life. It undermines a woman's well-being. This bill basically says, let's just keep women in the dark. That we don't respect them enough to let them make an informed decision. Women deserve better. They deserve to keep the right to choose life for their child. I urge a no vote on this bill.
Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. President. I come before the body today likewise in opposition to Senate Bill 190. It's a bit almost ironic that 35 of us are afforded an opportunity to make a choice today. The choice we make today is whether a woman is afforded a choice about their reproductive rights. The bill as drafted, I think, interferes with that right and what we've put in statute. Folks have reiterated this morning several times. In statute, a pregnant individual has a fundamental right to continue a pregnancy and give birth, or to have an abortion, and to make decisions about how to exercise that right. It doesn't say a pregnant individual has a fundamental right to continue a pregnancy unless they've taken mifepristone. It's contradictory. It puts us in a position where, under the language in the bill, we're doing the things I've heard argued in the other two bills this morning. It restricts care. It restricts access to care. It restricts comprehensive access, all the things we were advocating, others were advocating for earlier this morning and all day yesterday. I think there's just a better path forward, and the challenges around, I appreciate the language added yesterday on the floor about, again, not only are we're challenging and limiting a woman's right to choice, we're also going to penalize folks that are in a position to offer that. A licensee, registrant, or certificant engages in unprofessional conduct or is subject to discipline pursuant to this Title 12 if the licensee, registrant, or certificant provides, prescribes, administers, or attempts medication abortion reversal. I think about it, again, the arguments we've heard really for quite some time. If you just take out the last word in that phrase, reversal, this is everything the proponents have been arguing for, and that is happening in other states that they're so adamantly opposed to. A licensee, registrant, or certificant engages in unprofessional conduct or is subject to discipline pursuant to this Title 12 if the licensee, registrant, or certificant provides, prescribes, administers, or attempts medication abortion. Us adding reversal in there makes this quite complicated, and it shouldn't be. Yesterday, language added to that they're subject to that in this state unless the Colorado Medical Board, the State Board of Pharmacy, and the State Board of Nursing, in consultation with each other, each have in effect rules finding that it is a generally accepted standard of practice to engage in medication abortion reversal. So the window of time to do a little research was pretty challenging. I'm trying to figure out if that standard applies in a variety of instances around the medical field in Colorado, or whether it was uniquely assigned to just abortion reversal. From the Federal Food and Drug Administration, progesterone hasn't been evaluated by the FDA for reversing a medication abortion, but doctors are permitted to prescribe drugs for uses not approved by the FDA as part of the practice of medicine. There's no necessity to put this restriction in place now to limit access to a procedure and to medications that have been effective in a variety of ways for 40 or 50 years. I really encourage this body to give great thought to, again, the options afforded us today and what our choices are about to be made about options for others. I encourage the body to please give life a chance and reject this policy that restricts choice. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Liston.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members. I have sat here quietly for the last day, listening and learning a lot, quite frankly. As I've said to, I think, a couple of my colleagues, I'll confess to everybody here, I was raised in a family that, quite frankly, never spoke about abortion. It was never mentioned when I was a boy, a young man. It was something that was totally foreign to me and my family. I guess I lived in a whole nother world. I mean, I was totally ignorant of abortion and the implications of abortion, which is part of the reason why I've been so reticent to engage in this conversation. I've never had a family member, to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure of it, that's been in and around an abortion clinic. And so it's been pretty difficult for me, quite frankly, to engage in a lot of lively debate that we've had, but I have learned a lot. And I want to commend my colleagues, or commend everybody really, because you've really brought up some ideas and issues that I was not exposed to. I don't sit on the committee that of reference that heard this legislation, so I've just tried to listen and learn. But particularly my colleagues, I've been impressed by the arguments by the opposition to all of this legislation, because I do commend people who have tried to support it. I understand where you're coming from, but as I'll say a lay person that is tried to be open-minded, which I have been, I'm impressed, and I want to give kudos to my colleagues for their solid logic and and the facts that they've brought out. Not that the other side hasn't, because I'm sure you feel very strongly about your position. But I think about the people who are outside of this chamber who are not listening in, other than the millions who might be watching on the cameras and the handful of people that were listening in. I'm just speaking for myself, but I think that the public at large, this is just my opinion, the public at large would be flabbergasted and stunned to really hear the facts and the logic that, that the opposition has brought, because I think it's been overwhelming, in my opinion. As to it relates to Senate Bill 190, the thing that is one of the things of the many is whether it's intended or not. I won't say that it's been, but just the suppression of our First Amendment rights and our freedom of speech, what the dampening effect that Senate Bill 190 would have upon businesses and that are well-meaning and that are trying to protect the public, mothers and the families and the unborn, that the extreme dampening effect that Senate Bill 190 would have upon the public at large. I think that if people could hear what was going on and fully understand, they would be appalled and to a certain degree be horrified. Is that it's been brought out, and I want to emphasize this as I see it, because one side says we're for choice, which I get, you know, I understand the choice, and the other side says we're for choice also, but we're for an informed choice, that a lot of people don't know and understand, that when they go into a situation and they're faced with an abortion, they don't know the nuances and the facts and the figures and what may happen to them. And what one side wants to do is say, no, you cannot have a choice. This is the dogma. This is what you need to listen to. And what the other side says, listen, you can have a choice. If you want to have an abortion, that is your choice. On the other hand, there is another option, and we're just trying to explain it to you. So I'm not up here to rehash what has been said, no matter how eloquently on both sides. But I've sat here for the last 24 hours and then some. I too have gotten a lot of emails. I appreciate the arguments on both sides, but I've been thoroughly convinced and that a no vote is a correct vote. And I would like to issue a challenge to my good colleagues on the other side of the aisle, because I firmly believe that there are those of you who agree with us, and I want to issue a challenge is to rise up and make a good vote and make a no vote, and I think you'll feel good about a no vote. I too will be a no vote, and I thank you for listening.
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll keep my comments brief, but I urge a no vote on Senate Bill 190. And I don't come down here and share a lot of personal stories, and I definitely don't share personal stories about my family. I might share personal stories, but not about my family. But in this instance, I just want to say that progesterone is the reason I have my oldest granddaughter. And so that means a lot to me. And, you know, I don't want to eliminate a woman's choice to sustain her pregnancy or save her baby's life by limiting any options or by banning an abortion reversal pill. And if we truly value a woman's freedom to choose, then the woman should be able to gather all information necessary, including all options. And that's where I'm coming from in this. And I urge a no vote. But progesterone is the reason I have my oldest granddaughter that I couldn't be prouder of, and is going to be a great addition socially to this state or wherever she ends up. But I urge a no vote on Senate Bill 190.
Seeing no further discussion. Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to speak to my friends and family up in northern Weld County and my friends down in the southwest corner of Colorado, my indigenous friends, my family in the Denver metro area, my constituents in Jefferson County, and everybody in between who has called and cried out for this legislation over the last many years. I see the words on the paper, and it is very satisfying to me to acknowledge that there is a wrong in the community that needs to be fixed. And so for those who don't have any experience actually seeking this care, you've never been to either a crisis pregnancy center or a medical facility that provides reproductive health care, you've never been treated for any of the services that we've been discussing today, we need to remember what we're actually talking about. There are OBGYN medical professionals who will provide every reproductive health care service that a patient seeks, without bias, without politics, because their job, their profession, is to treat the patient for her medical conditions, provide the care that she needs, provide the information that she needs to make decisions about that care. It's the same type of professionalism that one has when they decide to become a doctor who treats your heart or fixes you up when you happen to get tossed off a horse, or treats children, because that's the area that they wanted to practice medicine in. OBGYNs provide a range of medical care for any different reasons during any different stage in any woman's life. And they consult with the patient about what those options mean, how you get there, what the outcome might be, the cost, the timing, the side effects, the medicine that you might need, everything, because this is medical care. There are also crisis pregnancy centers that provide information and services that some people find very helpful. When a woman is seeking information about an unintended pregnancy, for example, crisis pregnancy centers tend to advertise in a way that will capture their attention, sometimes in a time of, they're seeking information in a timely manner. And they specifically advertise to these people. Are you considering an abortion? Do you have questions about abortion? Come and find out all of your options. When the woman arrives, she may or may not be given a pregnancy test. She may or may not be given an ultrasound. But I will tell you what is not available to that woman who goes into a facility like that. There is no information about abortion care. There is no information about birth control. There is no information about long-term birth control. And that's just about this immediate decision. What you do find in a comprehensive medical practice is information about all those things. And a guarantee that you walk into the place in a safe place. And sometimes people don't find themselves in the situation because they wish to. Sometimes people are forced to have sex against their will, and they still have medical questions that follow that about sexually transmitted infections, about pregnancy, about how to prevent pregnancy. When I talk about the timeliness of these decisions, there's a very, very effective way of preventing pregnancy after you have sex. Plan B, the morning after pill, that is birth control. There's no reason that someone shouldn't at least know that that is an option for them if something like that had happened to them. If a woman is raped, She should be able to understand what all of her options are, and then she can decide whether or not she seeks that care. But that patient, that woman, will not receive that information if she walks into a crisis pregnancy center. She won't, because that's not part of their belief system. And that's fine if that's what that patient wishes to receive, okay? But to advertise that you provide a comprehensive set of services for someone seeking reproductive health care is false. It's misleading. And you cannot access the full range of reproductive health care if those decisions are never presented to you. Like I mentioned before, in the case of someone who was raped, to have the opportunity at least to consider the information about preventing a pregnancy in the first place. Pretty basic. Now, on the other hand, if you walk into a reproductive health care facility that offers a comprehensive range of services, that is what the patient would receive. First of all, making sure the patient was safe. Reviewing options for pregnancy prevention. Reviewing options for birth control, which, again, there's a lot of different types of birth control to fit that patient's need. Understanding how to access quality prenatal care. Understanding into the future services like cancer screenings, vaccinations that can prevent cancer. And yes, abortion care. Understanding what it might take to become pregnant if you are having difficulty doing so. Understanding your options as a family if you wish to no longer have children and the man would like to take part in preventing pregnancies. Information about vasectomy, information about other long-term or permanent ways to prevent pregnancy. These become politicized, and that information is kept from people who go into crisis pregnancy centers. Now, if that is your belief system and that is the only information that you wish to receive, then that is your choice. That's your right to do so. What is not acceptable is the current situation where people are being targeted and lied to and misled in order to draw you into one of these facilities under the guise of comprehensive reproductive health care provision. That is not okay. We are saying, do not lie to women. Then the woman and her family, or whomever she wishes to include in her decision-making process, has all of the information that she needs in order to make those choices. And I, for one, trust women to do so. They are smart, they are thoughtful, they are caring, and they know what is best for them, the kids they might already have, the kids they wish to have in the future, or just themselves. I respect women enough not to lie to them about their reproductive health care. And I am asking that today we finally recognize that there's a problem, we have a solution, agree with it or disagree with the bill in front of you. That is what we're talking about today. Providing women with the truth in terms of services provided by different types of facilities. And preventing crisis pregnancy centers from actively misleading community members about what they do. If I were a person who was facing something like this and wished to go into a place where I knew that we would not be talking about abortion or birth control, because that was what I wanted to seek in terms of my religious beliefs or what I felt was right or wrong, then I should be able to do that, and that's fine. Nothing in this bill prevents them from doing that exact thing. But if I am a woman who, in a timely manner, needs to seek comprehensive reproductive health care, I don't want my daughter or your niece or your neighbor or your granddaughter to be drawn in under false information to a dangerous situation that could prevent her from getting the information she needs to make the decisions for her life, her current well-being, and her future reproductive capability. And for those reasons and so many more, I will be voting yes on this bill, and I certainly applaud the sponsors and the community for bringing it forward.
The motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 190. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Simpson, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood, Baisley, Pelton B, Pelton R, Rich, Liston, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Priola. With a vote of 22 ayes, 13 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 190 is passed. Co-sponsors. Senators Gonzalez, Coleman, Colker, Janal, Jaquez Lewis, Fields, Sullivan, Henriksen, Danielson, Cutter, Buckner. Please have the president. Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor to Senate Bill 188.
Senator Zenzinger will be recorded as a co-sponsor on Senate Bill 188. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having voted on the prevailing side, I move for the reconsideration of Senate Bill 189.
The motion is for the reconsideration of Senate Bill 189. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion is adopted and reconsideration is granted. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move Senate Bill 189 on third reading and final passage as amended.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, the motion is the passage of Senate Bill 189. Are there any no votes? Senators Van Winkle, Will, Simpson, Baisley, Pelton B, Pelton R, Kirkmeyer, Smallwood, Rich, Liston, Gardner, Minority Leader Lundin, Priola. With a vote of 22 ayes, 13 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Senate Bill 189 is passed. Co-sponsors. If you were on it last time, you're still on it. Senators Mullica, Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, Thursday, March 23rd.
The motion is to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, March 23rd. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? The ayes have it, and the balance of the calendar will be laid over until tomorrow. Announcements. Signing of bills.
March 21st, 2023, the President has signed House Bill 1006, 1040, 1058, 1087, 1111, 1125, 1134, 1140, 1141, House Joint Resolution 1019.
Announcements. Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues in the Senate Judiciary Committee, we are going to meet, but we're going to meet at 2 o'clock. We're going to meet at 2 o'clock in the Old Supreme Court, and we're going to hear 4 bills. We're going to shake things up a bit on the calendar, and we're going to put Senate Bill 157, Coleman and Baisley's Wages Sunset first, followed by Senate Bill 89, 1192, and 164. Thank you so much. We will see you all then at 2 p.m.
Senator Buckner.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have an announcement. Education Committee will meet at 1:45, and we will hear Senate Bill 29, House Bill 1009, and House Bill 1191. 1:45. See you then.
Senator Fields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, just a friendly reminder that the Health and Human Services Committee will not be meeting upon adjournment to hear Senate Bill 179. We will hear that tomorrow at 1:30. Thank you.
Senator Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Transportation Energy will meet at 1:45 today. We are going to hear House Bill 1022, Senate Bill 186, and House Bill 1039. Look forward to seeing you there.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just would like to bring my fellow senators and colleagues up here, talk about Colorado Ag Day. And
announcement.
Oh, it's an announcement. Is it an announcement? It's an announcement today.
I'm not sure what you're going to say, so it's hard for me to know.
It's an announcement. Okay, thank you. Anyway, I just wanted to say, being an agriculture district where I have 6 of the top 10 ag-producing counties in the state in my district, and I just wanted to say how proud I was of the $47 billion that ag provides to the Colorado economy, and we need to remember that when we're spending the money on the budget. So, thank you.
Senator Simpson.
A personal announcement privilege, please.
All of it's granted.
Again, it's Ag Day here at the Capitol today. Please help yourself to some San Luis Valley grown potatoes in the back of the chamber back there. Not quite the variety that we offered last year. There's either red potatoes or russets. Last year we had fingerlings and purple potato. We had quite a variety last year, but market's been good and lots of potatoes are gone. So enjoy some great San Luis Valley potatoes. And again, appreciate recognition of Ag Day at the Capitol today.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am still in agriculture. I have been my whole life. Started driving tractor when I was 8 years old. My grandpa moved to Colorado from Kansas in 1937. It was dry in Kansas. We all thought he downgraded, but Colorado's been very good to us. And I believe if you figure in the cost of machinery and land, agriculture is the #1 industry in Colorado. So it's a great day to celebrate it in Colorado.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say I'm very proud to be here in support of Agricultural Day at the state capitol. I grew up on a dairy farm, 10 years in 4-H, did my part there, actually owned a dairy farm for several years, owned water still. Just want you all to know there isn't just one person here who understands about water. Yeah, no, believe me, I know. I know you are coming for it, but, and still own agricultural land in Weld County, which is the #1 agricultural county in the state of Colorado, 7th in the nation as far as agricultural production. 1/4 of the agricultural production is in Weld County. It's huge. And I was a county commissioner there for 20 years. So proud of our agriculture family. I know, first time you've ever heard that. Proud of the agricultural family we have here in the state of Colorado. Proud of agriculture. Go Ag. Right?
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to stand in support of Ag Day as well, represent the counties that are really the headwaters of the Colorado River. So we produce the water to produce agricultural products. I've been in agriculture my whole life, and I continue to do so. So great Ag Day.
Thank you. Senator Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one recognition, take the opportunity to highlight again my connection and say thank you to my dad, Alan Simpson, turned 80 in December, still as active on his farm as he was when he was 60, and his farm joins mine. So it's a wonderful opportunity, very fortunate. Not very many professions I get to go to work when I'm not here at home with my dad, my son, and my 2-year-old grandson, all at the same time at the same place. So wonderful profession, proud to be a producer.
Senator Pelton.
And thank you, Mr. President, and I'd like to echo that sentiment with my dad, 47 years of a livestock producer, cattle, and I get to stay with him while I'm working here at the Capitol, and we get to work our herd together, so it's kind of exciting, so thank you.
Senator Pelton, are we going to be able to enjoy some of the fruits of that labor next week? All right. Get hungry for the annual Senate grill out on Budget Day. Further announcements. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seeing no further announcements, I move that the Senate recess until 2 p.m. today. Colleagues, you do not need to return. We're simply reading bills across the desk.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Senate will recess until 2 p.m. today.